So is it a broom closet, Victor?
Sorry, I was muted. No, it's not quite a broom closet. There's some wiggle room for a mop or
Not quite. Okay.
No, so when we moved to Wilshire Center,
All right.
we anticipated the move over to Oppenheimer, so I rat holed a bunch of stuff. So my storeroom has like an 80-inch TV, executive furniture, height adjustable desk, and stuff like that.
Wow. Cool. All right. So let's jump back in here. So we talked a lot about getting ready for requirements this morning, different ways that you can gather requirements. And for this afternoon, we're actually going to talk more about starting the project and what are the different tools that we need to do that. And some of the ideas here are going to be repetitive, so we're just going to go through it quickly. But some are net new stuff, so we'll spend more time with those as we go through them. So for schedule management considerations, we talked about the iterative scheduling with backlog and the beauty of having, those time boxes so that you can focus on what is the work that needs to happen within that time box. And so does anyone remember what a typical iteration length is in terms of weeks? 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 2 to 4. Yep. So an iterative scheduled backlog, simply put, is you look at your entire product backlog, right? This is everything that you need to accomplish. And then you figure out, okay, what can we deliver within that, time box, be it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. And then you put all your energy just on that. And it delivers the value early on and incrementally. And as you're going through each iteration, you can quickly pivot if needed. So that's one of the cool things about being able to use this iterative method. So now this is hard to read. Let me see if I can make it bigger. So basically what you want to do is to prioritize. Well, let me try the slideshow here. It's not working real well. Must be my internet here. Let me try it again.
Ian, did you give this slide deck? I don't see it in the classroom. I only see the first half.
Yeah, I'm also checking the same thing. I don't see it.
So yeah, thanks for letting me know. I'll send it to Michelle. She should have it, but if not, I'll send it over. So this is the part 2 of the second module. So module 2, yep, and second one. So I'll definitely send it over. So one of the things to remember, both for the test and for your practice, is there's always going to be a lot of user stories that come at you, and you want to be able to prioritize which user story do you need to focus on first. And here's the tricky part. It's not about prioritizing because it's more important. It's more about prioritizing because that's what's needed first. So let's say, for example, let me go back here. Just spend a minute to explain this part. So let's say, for example, you're creating an app, and remember that we talked about the patient portal like 2 weeks ago, creating a patient portal. And so one of the user stories is, well, as a user, as a patient, you want to be able to log in, to get in, right? So you need to have the ability to enter your credentials, right? So your username and your password, right? So that's one user story. Another user story is being able to access your labs. Another user story is being able to schedule appointments. You guys still remember that conversation? Kind of. um, Either way, so 3 user stories, right? So Kelly, one user story is login. The next user story is scheduling appointments. Third user story is accessing labs. As you're prioritizing the user stories for your iterations, based on those 3, which one do you need to do first?
Wait, which Kelly are you speaking to? There's two
Let's
of us.
go with Kelly, Landa,
Okay, well, let's
Farah.
see. Wait, can you repeat that? So it was logging in one of the user stories?
Yeah, so logging in, accessing labs, scheduling an appointment.
Oh, logging in would be the
So if
priority.
you're creating a patient portal, right, but and you need that not because it's the most important thing, right? But it's the first thing that you need to do to be able to get to the other components of this application. Does that make sense? You're on mute, Kelly. Okay.
That makes sense.
See the thumbs up. Okay, cool. This is very important to note because the prioritization is not based on what is the most important, but the prioritization is based on what you need to do first. So in this case, logging in is important, but might not be the most important part, but it's obviously important to get in. But without the login, then you can't get to all of the other features. So you prioritize the user story by which needs to go first, and not necessarily what's the most important story uh, in your backlog. So remember that differentiation for the test. All right. So here's a new concept called on-demand scheduling. And this is a bit hard. And to be honest with you, I've used this maybe twice. And how it works is you have like a Trello board, and then as people complete what they're doing, they look at the board and then move on to the next assignment. So let's say, for example, Victor, I have on my board uh work on user credential, test user credential, um obtain signatures for user credential, and then a complete user credential, right? So those are all different steps. And so let's say you're working on something totally different, Victor. Let's say you're working on the labs, and then you finished early. The idea of this on-demand scheduling is that you would look up on the proverbial board and say, hey, what can I help you guys with on the credentialing side? And then let's say Alicia would say, oh, we actually need more testers. So you would just take one of those tasks, assign it to yourself, and start working on it. So it's an amazing system theoretically. If everyone is working at that level, but it's not an amazing system if different folks are working at different levels and at different speed. What ends up happening is you get someone like Elicio, for example, doing 2 to 3 times more than Lizette, for example, because it's not assigned. So it works well for really small teams and everyone is operating at like the same level. But if you have a big team, it becomes really challenging. And there's always that initial approach to an open task as well. I'm still working on something. People aren't necessarily too eager to add more things to their plate, right? So this on demand is really good for smaller groups, not too good for bigger groups. And also just the coordination piece. Um, you need to have a really good coordinator that's assigning things. Otherwise, you could have two people working on the same assignment and they didn't know because it wasn't properly labeled, things like that. So it's a great idea on paper. So that's on-demand scheduling. You basically schedule yourself for a task. So when you're scheduling a schedule management plan, you're reviewing different documents, and this is something that you'll see a lot. You start with reviewing documents, your OPAs, EEFs, different project plans. You use tools and techniques, expert judgment, set up meetings, right, to work on the schedule management plan, and then document things after. This applies to pretty much any management plan, right? Whether it's risk management, you start by reviewing the documents. You pull in people familiar with the different risks, and then you set up meetings, and then you document your findings. So this is a pretty universal template for management plans. All right. Back to definitions. So project activity, a distinct scheduled portion of work performed during a project. Nothing more to really add to that. An activity is, so in terms of definitions, an activity is a component of a decomposed work package. Activities are not the same as work packages or tasks. Again, for the test, the lowest level of the WBS is what again?
Work package.
Lowest level of WBS.
The work package.
Work package, perfect. And the work package can include different activities, right?
It's frozen.
Ian went to sleep.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Yeah.
Ian here. This one's confusing though, because if the work package is the lowest level, but then project activity is a decomposed work package.
I definitely asked exactly about this, and
So
I think it's the work package is related to the already assigned work. It's not a task, right? It's a part of the project. It's like breakdown. They do it with the planning package, then comes to the work package, right? So that would be the thing. That's why he said it's not a task. Task. Activities is different, work package is different. That's what it says.
So, work packages is the lowest level, but under the work package, you can have different activities. As I said, let's say your work is, schedule the location, include up the
Underwater.
venue, looking at facilities, things like that. And task, oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're cutting off little. Yeah.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is acting up. Can you hear me now, Smita?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So,
Oh,
all right.
and we,
So
and we
three
lost your screen
things.
share too.
So
Just
work
heads up.
package. Oh, lost the screen. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Here we go. Let me do that again. Perfect. So three definitions. The work package, everyone knows. An activity is part of the work package. Again, calling the venue is an activity. And a task, this is primarily pertaining to let's say Microsoft project, those different line items. So those are the ones that are considered the task. And again, this is for the purposes of the test. Rarely would you say, hey, Kenny, what work package are you working on? Right? It would be, what task are you working on? So for the test, that's the difference between activity, work package, and task. If they're asking about an entry in, a program, it's usually a task. If it's WBS, it's work package. And if it's specific, things to do in the work package, that's an activity.
So, okay.
All right.
Let me ask a question. Can you hear me? Ian?
Okay. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. So the work package is the lower level, the last level, correct? And so you have activities
The
and
last
tasks
level, yeah.
so you have activities and tasks within the work package. Is that correct? Is that you?
Yes. Yeah.
So using the
So it's the
example
lowest level. Go ahead, sorry.
So using the example you used earlier in the first session, for instance, a car, and then we got to the brake, and we got to the brake pad. When I said installing the brake pad would be the task or the activity, not the task.
So the work package in that situation would be, let's say, install brake pads, right?
Okay.
So the activity could include get brake pads from the warehouse, bring brake pads back, attach, screws to the brake pad, attach, brake pad to the rotor, things like that. So
So what? Okay. So what
but
is attaching the
so
brake
those
pad
are
to the
like
rotor?
the step by step.
Okay.
So that would be an activity, because those are the step by step, right? These are the step by steps underneath it. A work package would be, it's usually tied to a deliverable. So the work package would be, attached to brake pads, right? So deliverable would be, um, you know, now you have an attached brake pad. The step by step of, using a screwdriver to put in the 4 screws. So you wouldn't go to that level in terms of tracking, but you would have it as activities that you would follow, but not necessarily. So you, the technician, but not necessarily the project manager. So another way to think about it is this something that's reportable, right? If it's too small to be reported, then that's usually just under the activity. So for example, a project manager wouldn't ask you, hey, Kenny, did you actually put in all 4 screws, right? They wouldn't go to that level. They would just say, are the brake pads attached?
O- Okay, and then
So which
what's a task? Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
so a task, for the purposes of the task. So this is an entry into either a software, like a Microsoft project. So that's how they differentiate it. So if you're in a program and you're entering the lines, so those are considered tasks for the test again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And
So
so
that's how
in the example that Kenny mentioned, like installing brake pads, what would a task be?
Yep.
With that example?
Yeah, so the task would be obtaining brake pads from warehouse, disassembling or putting, not disassembling, but assembling all of the screws needed, getting the screwdriver, attaching screws to the brake pad, tightening the screws. So all of those are activities that you would do. Think of activities more as like step by step items. So step by step things that you need to do.
So the task would be
I hope that
install the
helps.
brake pad.
Exactly. Yep. Nailed it.
Thank you.
Awesome. Another way to think about it is a task would be make a sandwich. Activities would be get the bread, get the meat, get the mustard, and all that. So cool. Thank you guys for asking those questions, because again, I want to make sure that, especially the terms that you don't use day to day, that we get to really review them so that when it comes up in the test, it'll be very familiar. All right. The next one is the feature. So a feature is requirements really that allows a user to satisfy a business objective or need. So going back to the patient portal example that we had, one of the features is the ability to put in your credentials, right? Username and password. So that's a feature, credentials. And once you complete that, well, what is the business need for credentials to identify that it's you, right? So that when you log in, you're looking at your information. That's number one. And number two, the password is to ensure that only you can get into your information. So that's a feature. And we talked about user stories, right? The role, the goal, and the benefit. A group of user stories is called an epic. Don't ask me why. The folks that put together the Agile Manifesto said, hey, what do we call a group of user stories? I don't know, a group of user stories? No, let's call it an epic. So epic it is. So that's the term. When you hear the word epic, it's a collection of user stories. So features and epics. So features, you typically can finish a feature within, one sprint or one iteration. An epic, since it's a combination, right, of user stories, it's not uncommon for epics to span multiple sprints or multiple iterations. Does that make sense? So a feature you can typically finish in a sprint. An epic could span multiple sprints or multiple iterations. All right. So working with features, you want to make sure that if you have different people working on a single feature, that everyone understands how the feature performs, right? So that even though there's multiple people working on it, everyone has an idea of the finished product. If you don't have that clarified, you might end up with a product that might work for one of the team members, but when you put it all together, it might not fit. So I have a story for you. There were a group of, this was back late 70s, early 80s. There's a group of automotive engineers that flew to Japan, to Toyota, to look at their process. And as they were going through the process, they saw how, all the components were assembled. And towards the end, the last thing they put on the car is, were the doors. So they put the doors into the car and then it just fit, right? And so one of the American engineers said, "Hey, where's your soft hammer?" And the Japanese engineers were so confused. They're like, "What do you mean soft hammer? What? We don't know what that is." And the American engineer said, "Well, a lot of times the doors don't fit properly, so we use the soft hammer to literally hammer the door in, right?" And so the Japanese engineers were so confused. They said, "We don't have that problem because we address it in design." So our design allows for everything to fit. So we don't have a soft hammer. And I love that story because a lot of times we have an idea of how features should work, but maybe not the same idea. And we need soft hammers to make them fit. Wait, can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
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 Kenny, can you still hear me? Oh,
Yes.
okay, cool.
Yes.
It was saying trying to connect. I'm like, what? So it's very important that everyone understands the features, how it's supposed to work, so that you don't end up with soft hammers. You don't end up with workarounds. You don't end up with having to manipulate, massage, or do the last minute workarounds before you go live. So this is um one of those stories that I love to think about when I'm running big projects. I try to ask the team, do we have soft hammers? Are there things that we're not really paying attention to, but we just figured, oh, we'll figure it out later. Kelly?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, no worries. No worries. You press the soft hammer. Um, so it's really amazing. I highly recommend for your project management practice to really study Kaizen, to really study how the Japanese approaches a continuous process improvement. It's truly an art form how they approach it. Um, Tidbit is not going to be on the test, but did you guys know that all of their Kaizen approach, continuous process improvement, plan, do, check, act. Did you know that it was an American that brought that to Japan? Edward Deming. He he tried to teach it here to GM and those guys, and no one was really that interested in it. And so he took his ideas, his thoughts, and took it to Japan. And Toyota and those guys, they embraced it wholeheartedly. So this level of excellence that the Japanese have, that we're all trying to aspire to in terms of, Ford, GM, and whatnot, actually came from us, and we're just trying to catch up with the teachings that we said no to. I think it's like right after World War II. So fascinating how that story came about. So, all right. Another term for the test, milestones. So, we use this in everyday language. We hit a milestone, right? A significant point. And so you want to have enough milestones so that the team can see progress. You can stop, you can celebrate. But you don't want to have too many milestones that it then waters down the significance of having one, right? So, um, you want to have enough. I try not to have more than 10 milestones in a project so that people actually, celebrate it once we hit it. And this is also a great stopping point to do lessons learned, right? What went well as we got to this milestone? What could we have done better? And anything that we can change as we move into the next milestone. So a significant point or event in a project, program, or portfolio. All right. So okay, for the test, milestones have zero duration. Milestones have zero duration because they represent a significant point, but not necessarily a task in and of itself. So once you complete something, right, that's your milestone. But the milestone in and of itself, and this is also true in MS Project, the duration of a milestone is always zero. So the tasks have durations, but the actual milestone, think of it as a marker, like a checkered flag. We've accomplished it. We hit this certain point. That's what it means. So for the test, milestones have zero duration. All right. Any questions about that with the milestone before we proceed? Does it make sense why milestones have zero duration? All the durations are linked to the task, not necessarily the milestone. So
Yeah, it's kind of like
you can say, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say it's kind of like a checkpoint, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it's a checkpoint. It's it's something that we've achieved, right? So let's say we completed, so let's say your project has 4 phases and you completed phase 1, and it's a really cool milestone. But that stopping point in and of itself doesn't have a duration. All right. Estimating project activities. So when you look at a project, you first start out with what are the different milestones that we need to do. Let's say you're building something, so it might be, you're gathering all your information, followed by you're starting to build things, and then you test things, and then if there's any training involved, so that would be a milestone, and then you do all of your checks, go, no go, and then after that you go live, right? So that's an example of like high level milestones, right? So underneath those milestones, you have the different tasks. different activities. And so to estimate that, there are different tools that you can use. Hold on 1 second. I think trying to see if it was one of these guys that had, we mentioned it before. It was the, do you guys remember the bottom up, parametric, and analogous estimating techniques? Sounds familiar? Hold on, let me see. Here we go. So once we get to this slide, I'll explain the different estimating techniques. So at 47, let me go back up. So yeah, so we'll talk in a little bit about the different tools that you can use to estimate different activity durations. So different terms here to remember. Elapsed time is the actual calendar time required for an activity from start to finish. So if it, let's say that you started a task, an activity, let's say Friday, and you finished on Monday, elapsed time would say it's 4 days. But in reality, right, you didn't work Saturday and Sunday. Let's just say, normal work day, Monday through Friday. Effort is the actual number of hours, time that was put in to that activity, right? So let's say you worked a total of 8 hours. Let's say 4 hours on Friday and 4 hours on Monday. So that's your effort. The elapsed time would be the actual calendar time. So in this case, it would be 4 days. Does that make sense? So elapsed time is the actual calendar time, and effort is the actual hours of effort that was put into the task. So if you started something on Friday, you finished on Monday, elapsed time is 4 days. But if you only work 4 hours on Friday and 4 hours on Monday, then the effort is 8 hours. All right. So these are things you need to consider when you're estimating activity durations. Look at historical data. Ask other folks that have done this. Oh, how long does it usually take to spin up a new server? Look at resource calendar availability. The task could take 8 hours, but maybe you have a resource that can only work on it 2 hours a day. So that's going to affect the duration of the activity. Right. Schedule presentation formats. So there are different ways to look at the schedule. Is everyone familiar with a Gantt chart? Have you heard that term, Gantt chart? So here's an example down here. So here's an example of a Gantt chart. So you have, the activities, and you also have the relationships. So I think we have a separate, oh, here we go. So Gantt chart is just a list of activities. So the first column is the name of the activities. And then across you have the different weeks or months, right? And then you have the bar that represents the duration of each task. So from, let's say, for the first one, WBS 1.1 starts week 1, and then it finishes at the end of week 8. Can everyone see that? This bar right here? Okay. And usually there's a line in the middle, or not in the middle, a line that cuts through all of the tasks, and that's usually the today date. So you can see, where we are in terms of the work that's been completed and the work that is yet to be done. So for the test, you need to be familiar too with the different relationships. Of the different tasks. So for example, if you're looking at activity A, so once activity A finishes, activity B starts. So this relationship is called a finish-start relationship. Pretty straightforward, right? So activity A is done, finish. Activity B starts, start. So finish-start relationship. There are some activities that start at the same time. So in this case, activity A and activity B start at the same time. So that relationship is called start to start. And there are activities that I don't really care when they start. I just need to know that they both finish at the same time. So that relationship is called finish-finish relationship. And sometimes there are relationships that the activity A starts when activity B at the same time as activity B finishes. This is rare, but this is a start-finish relationship. So the most common one is the finish-start relationship. You finish one, you go to the next one. And the second most common is the start to start. When you begin one, the other one begins at the same time.
What was
All
the
right.
finish to finish relationship?
The which one?
The finish to finish relationship? Is that when they both
Yes.
end at
So
the same time?
absolutely. So finish to finish is you don't really care when they start. What you do care about is when they finish. Yep. So think about it as, let's say that you have a venue and there are multiple workshops going on in the venue. You don't really care when they start. You just need to know that by 5 o'clock, everyone should be done. So that's a finish-finish relationship. Yep. Right. So critical path method, you're gonna have exercises with Michelle that goes through the critical path. And it's, the good news is that you won't have a lot of the actual doing the math type questions for the test, but you'll be expected to understand what those diagrams look like. So critical path method estimates the minimum project duration and determines the amount of schedule flexibility. So we're going to talk about things like float and slack here in a minute. So minimum project duration. So critical path method. So critical path activity is any activity on the critical path. And I have a diagram here to show you. This would make it easier. So for example, so here's your project. So Lizette, what's the relationship between my start and activity one? What's the relationship between these two tasks?
Sure, I understand that question.
So Lizette, remember we talked about the relationships here? Finish
Oh,
start,
okay.
start to start. Yeah. So here, when you look at start and activity one, what's that relationship?
Would it be start to finish relationship?
No. So it would be the opposite.
Oh,
See?
start to start.
No, finish, right? So
Oh.
by the time this finishes, this starts. So to finish to start relationship.
Finish to
Finish,
start.
start.
Got it.
Yeah, finish.
So you,
Yep.
so you're
Uh,
saying that that is a finish to start. So start is the finish to beginning the activity one. Is that what you're saying?
so here, like, okay, let's get started. So at the end of this, So finish here is the start of your first proper or formal activity. Yeah. So finish start.
I think I'm a little confused if it's a finish start because we're starting something and then we're gonna start another activity.
So
Or am I
this might
able
be,
to?
yeah.
That's what
So look
that's
at
what I'm thinking.
look at start activity 2 and activity 4. This might make it easier, so we don't have the word start in the. So activity 2 and activity 4, the relationship is at the end of activity 2, finish. We start activity 4, start. So finish start relationship.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. So here's a critical path method. So you have start of the project. So first activity 1 is 6 weeks. Activity 2 is 4 weeks. And activity 3 here is 5 weeks. So let me pause here so we can go through this slowly. So let's say that Chris is working on activity 1. All right. Kelly or Tuno, you're assigned to activity 2. And Lizette, you're assigned to activity 3. So Chris, Kelly, Lizette. Everyone with me? Okay. So while Chris is working on activity 1, is there anything that Kelly and Lizette need to do at this point? Nothing yet, right? So they can, swing by Nordstrom, look at, what's coming up for the fall selection. Lizette's like, that's a good plan. So it's just Chris toiling away here. Chris is done, and then you have Kelly and Lizette starting, right? Activity 2, activity 3. So let's just say that they start at the same time. However, Kelly finishes in 4 weeks. Lizette takes 5 weeks, right? So if you look at this, if so once Kelly is done, right, it seems like they all start the next group of activities at the same time as well. So Kelly can wait around for a week, right? While waiting for Lizette to finish her 5 weeks. Does that run with me? So, Kelly's done 4 weeks. She's, like, all right, I'm done. And Lizette's like, wait. I have 1 more week to go, right? So since we're both going to start the next activity at the same time, Kelly has to sit around for about a week. That sit around time waiting for Kelly is also known as slack. That's your slack time. That's the extra amount of
Question.
time that Kelly has, right?
Why does she have to why is she waiting around? Because she's done. So couldn't activity 4 get started?
Per this type of diagram, no, because they're both kind of starting at the same time. But if that's not the case, let's say that we don't need both of them to finish at the same time and to start at the same time, then absolutely. But in this example, they're they're kind of in parallel. Um, that's why they're waiting. So that's why there's like a slack here. But let's say that what Kelly is doing, let's say she's working on, dashboard number 1 and Lizette's working on dashboard number 2. They're not related whatsoever. They're part of the same project, but there's no correlation whatsoever. They can do their own thing. Then absolutely, Kelly can just, she's done with activity 2, and let's say Kelly's also assigned to activity 4. So she can easily jump into it. But for this example, they're waiting before they both get to the next phase, which is activity 4 and activity 5. So that 1 week of waiting around is called slack. Also called float, because that's the time that you can, wait. So,
That was going to be my question, the difference between slack and float. So it sounds like it's the same thing.
so here we go. So float, there's different types of float. So there's the total float, which is the amount of time a scheduled activity can be delayed without interrupting the total end time. And free float is just in terms of like one activity to another. So if we looked at here, there's 1 week here. So this would be called 1 week free float. But if we added up all the floats, like here, there's another week here. This one's 3, this one's 4. There's 2 weeks of float there. I think that's it. So the total float for this diagram would be 1 week here and another week there. So 2 weeks. Is everyone with me? So I just added up all the, slack time, all the float. So that's the total float. The free float is when you're looking at one activity to the next. So here in this case, my free float is 1 week. So free float, going back to my definitions, think of free float as the amount of time that you have to play with from one activity to the next. Total float is the amount of time that you can play with your Slack for the entire project. So the total float, free float, and Slack is just more of a generic term for anything that any amount of time, any allowance, any leeway that you have. So the more technical one would be your float. All right. Who asked the question? Was that you, Chris?
That was me, Ed.
Oh, Ed, thank you for the lead in. That was a perfect lead in to the next slide. So cool. So agile release planning. So we talked about the different releases. We talked about how underneath a release, there's different iterations. That's part of your release plan. And within the iterations, you have the different features. And within the features, you have the different tasks assigned to it. So if you're, let me make this bigger. If you're, let's just spend some time on this one. Here, let me make this bigger. Apologize. It's hard to read. Hold on. Let me just do this. Let me just copy this. Let me do this. Here, just so it's bigger for today. All right, can you see the screen now? Okay.
Yes.
We'll spend the next 2 minutes on this because this is such a powerful slide that has so many things in it. So the product vision, it starts there. Like, what is it that you want to create or build in the future, right? So that's your vision. So the vision drives your roadmap. Okay. What is it that we are going to do? So for example, you're thinking about building, 4-story building. So your roadmap would be, build, 4 different stories. And your roadmap then drives your release plans. So think of your release plans of release 1 would be floor number 1, release 2, floor number 2, release 3, floor number 3. Or if you're doing an application, release number 1 will have all of these amazing features, and then release number 2 would, be more features, so on and so forth. So within each release, right? So So you start with a product vision that dictates your roadmap. Within the roadmap, you have the different release plans. So here's the release 1, release 2, release 3. What we can actually do, so think about, remember, let's just stick with that patient app, patient portal app, right? So release 1, let's say we will have a scheduling feature, right? So that's release 1. Release 2, you'll have access to your labs. And then release 3, let's say you can book imaging services, right? So the first one is just scheduling with your doctor. Number 2 is being able to look at your labs, and number 3 is to be able to book procedures like MRIs and things like that. So release 1, under each release, there are different iterations, right? So remember, the first iteration is okay, so now we're gonna work for the next 2 weeks, right? And these are the things that we're gonna complete in that first iteration. So every release plan has different iterations underneath it, and every iteration plan has different features underneath it. And a feature, right, is composed of the different user stories, right? So let's stick with what did we say release 1 was? The ability to schedule appointments with doctors, right? So that's release 1. So underneath that, you have all the different iterations that you do. You get to your MVP, and then you try it out. Hey guys, what do you think about this? But before you can do that, underneath each iteration, you have the iteration plan, which is composed of the different features. And each of the features is composed of a user story, and each user story is composed of different tasks. So product vision, then the roadmap. The roadmap dictates the releases. The releases is comprised of iterations. Your iterations are comprised of features, and your features are comprised of user stories, which are then comprised of tasks. So there's probably 3 to 4 questions here that you'll get on the test. So this is a great slide to have handy for your review. Okay, thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Lana.
And with this,
So,
hello. Can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you.
Would these be called
Yeah.
epics then?
Would these be called, what was it?
An epic, since there's different stories, or
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Someone's paying attention. Yes, ma'am. So the group of those features that you highlighted would be called an epic. Yep.
Okay.
Kelly or Tuno.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry, what is this called again? Agile something? I think it's on the previous slide.
Oh, an agile release planning. Yep, sorry, let me just delete this one. So agile release planning. So
Okay,
that would be this one. Yep.
thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. So before we go on a quick break, I'd love to, I'll stop sharing here, and let's see if we can do a quick exercise. And you guys tell me, okay, so, and just raise your hand or shout it out. So this is the beginning of any project, any agile plan. This is the absolute beginning. So this is the product, starts with a V. Vision, Jasmine, that's correct. Product vision. So the product vision helps dictate, starts with an R.
Roadmap.
Roadmap. Thanks, Monica. Once you have the roadmap, now you can think about, starts with another R,
Release plans.
release plan, releases. Yeah, release plans, that works. Within each release plan, you have different, starts with an I,
Relations.
iterations. That's correct. That's correct. Right. All right. Within each iteration, you have, starts with an F,
Features.
Features.
features, right? And within each feature, you have different
User stories.
user stories. And a group of user stories is called
Epic.
Epic.
Epic. And within each user story, you have,
Task.
starts with a
Task.
P,
Oh.
task. There you go. You guys nailed it. Awesome. With that, you earned your 10-minute break. Uh, thank you guys. I know it's hard on a Friday afternoon, but thanks for responding. So cool. Let's reconvene 3:16 and we'll do our final stretch. All right. Last stretch, guys. Almost there. Almost there. Hey, is anyone going to the All-In Summit at UCLA? Have you guys heard of this? It's September 7 to 9. It's are you guys familiar with the All-In podcast with Chamath and those guys? It's yeah, if they're pretty big in the podcast scene. And Chamath was one of the early um programmers with Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. So um I got a text message from my friend that's like coming in from Chicago to attend the event. And I'm like, wait, what? They're gonna be here? Um, Always the last to know. All right. So resource optimization techniques. Before I proceed, you guys good with this screen? Releases, iterations, features, user stories, task. All good? All right, cool. So there are times where you don't have, enough resources for the task, or you have resources with time constraints. So you have to figure out different ways of being creative to adapt, right? And so there are two main methods of adapting to resource constraints. One is called smoothing, and the other one is called leveling. So what are these two things? So smoothing, if you're writing things down, um, it adjusts the activities of a schedule to keep resource confinements, but it doesn't change the critical path. Um, so, so here, hold on. This is an easier way to understand it. What's that called? Smoothing. Okay. So resource smoothing. So as you can see here, week 2, I have, activities that are like, I don't know, maybe 50 hours. So there's way more activities that need to be completed in week 2. And what can we do to fix this, right? So let's say this is you, Sweta, and I don't want you to be working 50 hours on week 2. So what can I do, right? So as the name implies, you smoothen things out by moving some of that workload, if possible, from week 2 to week 4. So then it goes from, 50 hours here and about, I don't know, let's say that's 15 hours there. You kind of move tasks around so you have a nice smooth 40 hours here for week 2, 3, and 4. So notice that we didn't have to extend past week 4, right? So let's say, you know, um, these are 4 Fridays, week 1 Friday, week 2 Friday, week 3 Friday, week 4 Friday. So we didn't have to extend past week 4 Friday. Does that make sense? We just moved the task around. So we still completed it at the same time, week 4 Friday, but we don't have Sweta missing out on dinner and other plans for week 2. We smooth things out. So that's smoothing. So going back to the definition, it does not change the critical path, right? Does not change or delay the completion dates. Okay. So smoothing does not change the completion dates. Leveling, on the other hand, leveling does. As you can see here, to accommodate Sweta's week 2 of more than 40 hours, instead of just, moving this down and smoothing things out, we added an extra week. So leveling, adds an extra week. And if you look at the definition, adjust the start and finish date based on resource constraint. So this obviously will change your critical path because we're changing the timelines. So I think the easiest way to remember this is smoothing S, smoothing sticks with a timeline. That's it. The other one doesn't. The other one just adds more time. So smoothing sticks with a timeline. So that's the best way to remember that. So any questions about smoothing and leveling before we proceed? Cool. Awesome.
Real quick, Ian, so regards to smoothing, it doesn't extend the timeline because we have those 4 weeks, right? To accomplish said all those tasks. So, but if we had, let's say 3 weeks and not 4 weeks, and we needed to get everything done in week 2, then we'd have no choice but to level it, to add that extra week.
Absolutely. Yep, exactly. Yep. So you try to do smoothing first, right? Can we keep to the timeline and just move the task around? And if that's not possible, then you add the extra week. That's the leveling. So week 5. Yep. That's another way of looking at it, Victor. Start with smoothing and end with leveling if you can. All right. So that's for the resources. So what if you have scheduling issues, right? So there are scheduling compression techniques that you can use. Obviously, each one comes with their own set of risks. So the first one is called crashing. So this shortens the scheduled duration by adding resources. So a good way to remember this is crashing is caching. You're spending money, you're getting resources. Crashing is caching. You're paying for people to come in to work. So if you look at the slide over here, so here's the normal schedule, right? So we have, for example, Victor working five days, and then we have Cinderella working 6 to 10, and Jennifer working 11 to 15. So that's the original schedule. But then let's say leadership said, hey guys, we don't have 15 days. We need to cut this down by a few days. What are the options that you have? So the first one is crashing. So you crash the schedule by adding more people. So now, if you notice here, let's say days 1 to 5, just one person. We cut this by 2 days by adding 2 people, right? So we're throwing cash at the problem. So 2 people, hopefully we'll get it done sooner. Does that make sense? Another way to do it, if you don't have the cash to crash, is you can fast track. And what that means is things that are usually done in a linear fashion, like finish days 1 to 5, and then, so let's say that days 1 to 5 is collecting requirements. Let's say 6 to 10 is doing the build, and let's say 11 to 15 is doing the testing. Now, for fast track, oops, hold on. All right, thanks, Kelly. For fast track, instead of waiting to finish all the requirements selection, at day 4, you're beginning the build. Can you guys see this? So instead of waiting to finish days 1 to 5, right? You're starting earlier. So for fast track is also high risk because let's stick with the example. You don't know all the requirements and you're starting to build already. There's a chance that there could be another requirement that would totally affect your build. And so it's high risk, but it saves you time.
So you're saying that fast track, you're overlapping because you're
Yep.
figuring that 3 of those days, we created enough of phase one or piece one or
Yeah. Enough
task
of the
one,
requirements, for
enough
example.
of the
Yeah.
requirements to start
Right.
four or
Building.
5 or 6.
Yep.
So you should have everything that you required for 4, 5, and 6, right? Don't you have those? The requirements are there. I mean, the whatever's required was done for 1, 2, and 3 was done for the first 10 pieces of 4, 5, and 6. No?
So let's assume that.
We could say it's dare to dream. Dare to dream.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So imagine, Kenny, that you're on site, and then the first week, Monday through Friday, you're talking to different stakeholders, you're identifying requirements, you're gathering user stories and whatnot. And week 2 is then we then start to build based on our, the requirements we got from the previous week. But since leadership said, hey guys, we don't have the 15 days to do this, we need to speed things up. And so after 3 days, so now it's a Wednesday, right? That you're meeting with people. You're still meeting with them on Thursday, Friday to gather requirements. But the team that you have, let's say Alicia is in charge of build, you now have Alicia starting to work on the build, right? On Thursday, with what we've gathered Monday through Wednesday. And then we're hoping that whatever is said on Thursday, Friday from the requirements gathering does not contradict what Alicia is starting to build. So fast tracking is very risky because you're building before you know all the requirements.
So you
So
really
yeah.
wouldn't use fast tracking. I mean, I don't see a reason why you would want to use that in maybe in something small.
So this usually, again, if you're told that we don't have the time, and so you need to figure out your schedule. So usually if you have the money, you would do crashing, right? You would assign more resource, get the job done. But if time and money are your constraints, then you do fast tracking. And uh, now, especially for Mike and construction, probably don't want to do fast tracking. Cement is still wet.
Yeah, not a good idea.
Yeah.
Not a good idea.
Yeah. But yeah, so ideally, Kenny, you would do the first option, which is normal. Let's just do things as scheduled, as planned. So here's a question for you guys, and just focus on the event, not the politics. Question for you. COVID hit, right? And then we had, I think it was it Operation Warp Speed? When we tried to put together the vaccine that usually, takes years. And then we did it in months, right? So that was
Fast tracking.
crashing and fast
Oh, that's
tracking
crashing. Okay.
and, throwing in the kitchen sink, right?
The little
We threw
bleach.
right, a little bleach. Good one. But that truly was fast tracking, because regularly in normal times, you would have more time to investigate. You'd have more time to test it out with a smaller sample size. You'd have more time to tinker and revise and improve. You'd have more time to get all the approvals needed. and then you have time to do the appropriate campaigns and communication, and then you would launch it. Here, we did all of that on a Thursday, right? And so that is an extreme example of fast tracking. But the constraint was, well, people were dying. So we need to get something out there. So normally, you wouldn't fast track something like that, but it was just what was needed in the time. And we'll leave it to the historians to adjudicate whether that was the best approach, or maybe spent a little more time. But yeah, so that's an extreme example of fast tracking.
So Ian,
So all right.
a little closer to home is during that same time, UCLA, set up mobile inoculation.
Oh
and
yeah.
all over the place and pretty much overnight.
Yeah.
So that was a huge effort.
That was a huge fast track. And Mike, also too, the hospital, right? What do you call it? Like the not mobile hospital, the
The
like a
temporary
stand
hospital, the
temporary. Yeah.
we did basically a field hospital build in 48 hours.
Yeah, that was insane. Yeah, that was field hospital. So that's another example of extreme fast tracking, because time was not a luxury for sure. So cool. So again, for the test, if you're throwing money at it, you're adding more resource. Which one is that?
Crashing.
Crashing. So crashing is caching. And if you're starting things in parallel that should be linear, that is
Leveling. I'm sorry,
fast
fast tracking.
fast tracking. Yeah. If you are going back to the resources, if you are um moving the task around so that you still finish at the same time, is that smoothing or leveling?
Moving.
Smoothing. Yep. If you're adding more time, so to accommodate the resource constraints, is that smoothing or leveling?
Leveling.
Leveling. Okay. Yeah. So again, a nice trick or tip to remember is smoothing, same end date. So both S. So same smoothing, same end date. All right. Cool. All right. So let's review some terminologies around projects, program, and portfolio. So the overarching above everything is called a portfolio, right? That's your overall. Think about it. Underneath your portfolio, you have programs. And underneath programs, you have projects. So for the test, the difference between a portfolio and a program is that a program is a group of related projects. The keyword is related. So let's say you have the heart and vascular programs. Underneath that, you might have, cath lab, you might have cardiac rehab, you might have everything related to heart and vascular, right? So programs, grouping of related projects. Portfolio could be related projects, could actually include programs, or could be projects that are not related, but they still serve the strategic goals of the organization. So an easy way to remember it is related projects, programs. That's it. Everything else is is part of the portfolio. So projects, the lowest level, move up. A group of related projects is called a Sweta, group of related projects.
Programs.
Programs. And the one above that, Lisette?
Portfolio.
Portfolio. Yep. And your portfolio is driven more by the strategic goals. So it could be, you can have different programs underneath the portfolio, you can have different projects, but it's driven by the strategic goals. So with that in mind, I hope that the term program manager and portfolio manager makes a little bit more sense, right? So program manager deals with projects that are all related, right? So this is so you're focusing either as a field, a specialty, related outcomes, and a portfolio is much higher, and you can have projects that are not necessarily related. So let's say that your portfolio is everything ambulatory, right? So all the projects related to orthopedic, you might have an orthopedic program manager, right? So that program managers all projects related to orthopedic, eventually rolls up to that program manager. And then you might have, a program manager for, let's say, oncology, right? So all the projects related to oncology rolls up to the oncology program manager. But, not but, and all of those programs, ortho, oncology, neuro, they all roll up to the portfolio manager, right? So obviously the ortho and oncology are not related, but they all rolled up to the portfolio because what was the portfolio manager in charge of?
Both non, uh, like both program manager as well as like not related one also, I think.
So we said the portfolio manager was in charge of anything that was outpatient, right? So anything outpatient. So these are all outpatient. So that's how they're all connected. So programs, no, projects, programs, and then portfolio, if you're looking at it from a hierarchy. All right. Sorry. Okay, moving on to managing budgets and resources. We talked about baseline. So does anyone remember our definition for baseline? This is what version? Starts with an A. Approved version. Yep, it's approved. So your baseline is the latest approved version. So the cost baseline would be the latest approved cost, right? So the latest approved budget that you have. We'll talk about management reserves later. Let's see here. Oh, estimating techniques. Do you guys remember the analogous, parametric, bottom up that we talked about from, I think it was the first meeting? And we can jump into that right now. So here we go. So Kenny, for example, let's say that you're a real estate guy and you're in charge of, oh, I don't know, Ventura County. That's your area. And I say, hey, Kenny, how much is a 3-bed, 2-bath in your area? And what would you say?
High. Expensive.
Okay. So roughly how much? Roughly how much is it?
1 million. 1 million.
1 million.
Okay, 1.2 million. Yes, okay.
1.2. Sweta, you're in charge, you're a real estate broker, and let's say you're in, oh, I don't know, let's say somewhere in South Dakota. What would you say? Just take a guess. 3-bed, 2 baths.
I would say less expensive, maybe 500.
500, 500. Okay. And
Tell you in Houston, you can get a brand new one.
Okay. Exactly.
3 bedroom, 3 bath, like 3,600 square foot for like 250K.
all right. So Alicia, 250K. So what you all just did is called analogous estimating. It's a high level, right? You're just basing it off of historical data. It's so if I buy a house, a 3-bed, 2-bath in Alicia's neighborhood, it might not be that exact number, but it's within the ballpark, right? So I have an idea. Um, that sounds really good right about now, Alicia, just so you know. Good Lord, California prices. I don't think they teach home ownership to the next generation anymore. I mean that they deleted it from the dictionary.
In California for sure.
In California, yeah. Um, I tell my kids, dream high. Soon you'll be able to afford to rent. Uh, good Lord. It's yeah, that's a different Oprah for a different day. But yes, it's so with those prices, you have an idea, right? So if let's say your budget is 700,000, and I could look at Sweta in North South Dakota, I believe, and I can also look at Alicia in was it Houston or Austin? What did you say, Alicia?
Houston.
Houston. So I can look at Houston, but I won't eat. I won't even bother Kenny, right? I won't even bother him in Ventura County. I'm like, all right, that is way above my pay grade, my price range. Okay, so so that's analogous. You're just looking at historical data. Parametric is a little bit more accurate, and this is where you're looking at, let's say, square footage, and and how much square footage did you say, Alicia?
3,600.
3,600. So if I were to look at 7,200, roughly how much would that be?
You
Just
broke up.
based off of the information you.
If you looked at what was the
Oh,
square
so
footage?
you said 72. I'm just doubling it.
Yeah, wow,
So
brand
I'm looking at,
new with land, you're probably gonna be at that 7,500, your price range, 750,000. Yeah,
okay.
brand new.
So what you did there is you just looked at your existing number, and since I doubled my square footage, you pretty much doubled what you had for the
Yeah,
initial. And applying that math is called parametric. So you just extrapolated from your initial information. That's what parametric means. In the same way that, let's say, for example, it takes me 1 day to paint one wall, how many days would it take to paint 4 walls?
we're saying 4.
4 days, right? So you have a data point and you're using math to get the answer. So it's much more accurate than analogous, but as in all things in life, not everything is pretty straightforward. So it's a little bit better, but not completely accurate. Bottom up, on the other hand, this is where, let's say, okay, so I really want to be close to Alicia. The prices look nice and it's a new neighborhood, new schools, all that. So now I'm gonna go in and say, okay, I found my neighborhood. Now let's take a look at um the specs, right? So what kind of kitchen, what kind of countertop, um, are you gonna be putting in Viking in your appliances and all of that? So now you're adding things from the bottom up. So you're just adding up everything, right? To come up with an estimate of how much this 3-bed, 2-bath house would be in Houston, Texas. So that is obviously the most accurate. But you don't want to start there, right? So you want to start first with analogous, like roughly, where can I fit in with my budget? So you don't want to start with, well, I'm thinking of, getting Viking and I'm thinking about granite countertops. Like, no, no, no. You start first with roughly where would my budget fit in, right? So that's the difference between the three. But I don't want you to think that one is better than the other. There are different use cases for each one, right? And so you pick an estimating tool that you need for for that specific uh, task or for that specific problem. So same thing, for example, if you're a community hospital and you're looking at an electronic medical record, and so then you go around and ask like, hey, Allscripts, how much is it for, my 200-bed hospital? And Allscripts might say, oh, for you, I could probably do, let's say, 50 million, right? And then you go to Cerner or Oracle Health, and they would probably say, oh, maybe 100 million. And then you go to Epic, and then they say, you're too small. No, I'm kidding. They'll probably say 300 million, right? So that will give you enough of an idea as to which one to pursue, right? So in that case, analogous is perfect. You don't want to go to, the three vendors with all of your dashboards and flow charts. Like it is too early, too early. So after so I can't afford Epic, and then you go back to Oracle and say, hey, any chance we can get this to below 100? And if Oracle says, no, maybe 110, but definitely not lower than 100. And so now you're left with Allscripts, right? So that's how you can pursue and get more details as to, okay, how much would it really cost if we're doing it with these number of specialties, so on and so forth. So there's a time and place to use each and every one of them. Same thing with, um, let's say, for example, you're building out new clinics, and you know that, let's say 10 clinics is about, I don't know, let's just say $1 billion. And so if you need 20 clinics, you can just do the math. So you need 2 billion, right? So that's where parametric would be a nice tool for that. So cool. So those are your estimating techniques. And we talked about the pros and cons of each one. Any questions? Cool. All right. So you guys have heard the phrase, just give me a rough order of magnitude for estimates, right? Let's give me a rough order. So rough order of magnitude is about, 25 to 75% accurate, right? So it's a really huge swing, right? And a definitive estimate is about 5 to 10% off. So if someone gives you a definitive estimate for, let's say, $100 million, then you can expect it to be, anywhere from 105 to 110, right? But if it's just super rough, then $100 million might be 75 to 175. So just a wild swing. But again, you need rough order of magnitude to just give you an idea, right? Like how much would this be roughly? Um, so all estimate types are needed for different phases. All right. So we talked about the different estimate types. Um, Here we're going to talk a little bit about project governance and also why it's important when you're looking at, budgets and also when you're estimating things, because at the end of the day, if you're short on time, short on money, um, short on resources, then you'll probably need someone to help you out. And this is your change control board. This could be your project sponsor, and this could be, depending on how big of an ask it is, it might roll up to your executive team, which is part of your project governance. So for the governance team, you want to make sure that you report any big deviations, usually more than 10%, you to pass. In terms of compliance, government regulations, corporate by. So these are your internal and external compliance, especially for healthcare. There are so many areas that we need to comply with, from the government, and also federal, state, local, and also other entities like Medicare. And also within, for example, UCLA, we have a lot of policies and procedures that we need to comply with. And so being familiar with that is very important, so that you stay within compliance. Lessons learned register, we talked about this already. For the test, you want to make sure that you complete, you do your lessons learned, not just at the end of the project, but as you hit significant milestones, significant, the phases or gates. So you want to do lessons learned throughout the project. All right. Estimating cost. So the first thing you want to do is to look at what what are what are some of the projects that are similar to this? Again, the analogous that we talked about, to give you an idea, right, of the cost. You want to get as much information as you can up front, and then you talk to people that have worked with it before, either team members, project team members, vendors, suppliers, and then that will help you estimate, the cost of your project, depending on your scope, of course, and then you come up with your best guess, right? And that would include, your resources, um, and everything that you need for this project to be successful. Now, um, and we have 5 more minutes here. I'll ask my last question to Mike. So Mike, we're talking about estimating costs here. For the big construction projects wherein you're getting materials from, different parts of the world, um, how do you factor in, like changes in sometimes, governments where there could be turmoil and the prices might go up. Like, how do you guys do that on that scale?
I have done other projects besides construction, so.
Oh yeah, true, very true, very true.
So some of the very large construction projects that I've done in my past would be years of construction. And we would place orders with large manufacturers or even countries to buy some of the raw materials. And then we'd buy futures against it. So you kind of buy it on two fronts. So if your particular distribution avenue failed, the futures that you bought on the market would allow you to take whatever money you've earned on it and source it from a different location or different company. So for these really large things like building dams or infrastructures for entire cities, you have multiple distribution channels of getting your particular raw materials that you need. It cannot be just one, as there are so many things that happen. Certain countries that you might get from, they have unionized labor that can go on strikes. You have distribution channels that might not get to you if the roads or shipping channels or trains or whatever aren't running or have weather problems or whatever. They might have their own raw material shortages where they can't produce their particular products. And when you're doing these really, really large multi-billion-dollar type projects, any day you're having people on site without materials for them to work with, you're costing just an enormous amount of money. So you have multiple ways that you can get those materials in to keep your construction moving. And making sure that you have contingency plans against it is part of your sourcing division's job when you're running these really large projects. Now, if you're doing smaller projects, sometimes you just place the order and get the things delivered before you break ground and you just store it. That's also done. But for these really large ones where you're just getting stuff in constantly for 4 or 5 years, you need to have those channels open for the entire time.
So when you say futures, Mike, is that like you're locking in a price, or what does that mean when you
Yeah,
say you buy?
you would lock in a price with like multiple sources on the futures
Mm,
market. So you
mm.
would pre-buy, but that pre-buy was not with a company, it was on the futures market. So you have multiple vendors you can buy it from.
Wow. Wow.
So that would be a group within your project team that would handle those things on those really large projects. It's your sourcing team.
Wow. That is a lot. So yes, so thanks, Mike. And I love the constructions examples because it always takes it to the nth degree. It's just my goodness. Thankfully our projects in healthcare, we don't need to go to a futures market for stuff. A futures market for servers. Like we don't, we're pretty lucky that our projects are a smaller scale. But
So I didn't mention it, but the other side is if where you're receiving the products from, if you're heavily unionized, if you're doing a project someplace, you
mm,
can't just receive goods in. You have to have, proper journeymen or unionized people receive them in and check those goods. And you could have trucks at a queue waiting to come in. And if your right people aren't there, you cannot bring those materials in. If you do, and you then gone against the union, they shut your entire job down. So those type of stagings and making sure you're in good with your unions are also really important. And over the course of those types of projects, my team and I did unintentionally run afoul against the unions, and they quickly shut you down. They teach you those lessons hard, so that you never forget them. You never do it a second time.
wow. It would be so disappointing to eventually get your raw materials in on time and you miss, whatever regulation with the union and there's no one to unload it. Good Lord. Yeah, it would be wow. All right. Thank you, Mike. So that's a great example of really looking at estimating cost and I think in one of our sessions you mentioned, Mike, that they're not just a person, but there are teams of people that all they're doing is constantly looking at prices, constantly looking at where we're sourcing, if we need to get from another supplier, just constantly finger on the pulse with materials since you're sourcing from so many different locations.
Yeah, during the course of these long projects, small changes in prices can either pose your budget or surprisingly give you some slack in your budget to do something nicer. Usually it's the former, not the latter. But then you have to cut something late. You might have the budget or
Wow.
plan to do some beautiful art piece in the middle of, a quad
Nice.
or something, and that would have to be rethought as you got further along. But yeah, there's constant teams of people doing that on those large projects.
Wow. So there you go. Alicia, I could have my 3-bed, 2-bath with a Picasso, because I had extra funding. Probably more expensive than the actual house. Um, but yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And so we are at time, folks. thank you for participating in our exercises. I know that today was really hard with a lot of terms that were new that we had to, spend time powering through. So thank you for that. And as always, before we go, I'd like to get 3 shares from the team, things that you learned, any comments, feedback, and then we'll close it out. Shweta said, thank you, Mike, for sharing your experience.
Always here for it.
I just like the term crashing is cashing.
Crashing is cashing. All right. Yes, it is expensive indeed. It is expensive indeed. All right. One more and we'll
I
close it
like
out.
the resource smoothing and leveling.
Smoothing and leveling. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
this was really good.
Yep. Smoothing keeps the timeline. And last one. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up again. Lana?
Lana, right?
Lana. I'm gonna buy you a Starbucks every time I butcher it. So I owe you three cups of coffee now. So Lana, your turn. You had your hand up. You're on mute. All right. I guess she walked away. But did we get 3? Was that 3 already? Oh, audio issues. Okay. So Lana, if you can drop in the chat what you wanted to say, and then we'll close it out. Baseline, latest approved version. Yep, that's absolutely right. Okay, with that, folks, thank you so much. This was an amazing session. Thanks to all of you, and I will see you again next Friday. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Bye, thank you.
Good
Take
Thank
care,
weekend.
guys.
you.